I wanted to come in from the field today and have a brief talk with you on scents and lures. Here at Kishel's we get inundated with calls and people and customers that pick our brain on understanding scents and lures. And I just want to share some of this with you guys to give you a briefing, a basic understanding of these tools, because you're using them out in the field, and the better you are at using these tools, the more success you're going to have in the field. So I just want to take a moment from the trap line and talk a little bit. For the past 40 years and more, boy, I'm getting old, but more, I've been manufacturing scents and lures for all sorts of industries. A lot of animal research, animal behaviorists, professionals in the field, trappers, hunters, dog trainers, outdoor enthusiasts. And I'm still learning in a lot of ways, but I've got a sound foundation on scents and lures and the differences in how you can use them and how you can apply them. So that's what today's about. It's a briefing of scents and lures to give you the basics, so when you go out to make a choice, you've got a clearer understanding of what you're going to try to use, because no matter what confusing messages are out there in the world, scents and lures are nothing more than communicators. They're storytellers, and the better you are at presenting them by telling that story to that animal, whether it be a predator or prey, your success is going to go through the roof, because it becomes a game after a while. What you want to use, how you want to trigger that animal, and that comes from just a basic understanding of them. So just to start you out real quick is, ask yourself, what is a scent and what is a lure? They're two distinctive categories, and knowing them both is going to set you on a road that you can't believe as you go forward. So identifying a scent, if you looked in the dictionary, it describes a scent as nothing more than the smell after an animal is passed. And I'm being a little generic with that, but basically, that smell of that animal. Whereas with a lure, it talks about the same as an animal that's passed, but it also adds pleasure and gain. So when an animal smells that lure, it's concocting a pleasure or a gain, getting something out of that additional smell. So therein lies the two differences. Scent, in my opinion, singular makeup, feces, urines. You often hear of the beagle following the scent of the rabbit, that type of smell. Singular makeups. Where a lure, on the other hand, is often pleasure and gain. So a lure is a composite, a combination of various, in my world, essences and fixatives and midtones, high tones, low tones. It's the makeup of that lure that intrigues that animal to get closer and closer and closer, and you get photographed, shot, trapped, whatever the case may be. So that's the difference between the two. And inside of that, there's only three categories of lures. Regardless of all the brands and all the things out there in the market, there's only three categories. And you need to know those categories to be successful in using them. So write this down: gland, food, and curiosity. No matter what you buy, that's the three categories of lure. When you think of food, think of the animal you're going after and the foods they like. That's a food attractant, okay? When it comes to curiosity, think of what kind of curiosity smell in that area would intrigue that animal enough to come in. You hear that curiosity killed the cat. Well, it did, because it came in contact with an odor it wasn't quite used to in its area, but it liked it enough that it came in and worked it. And that's a curiosity smell. And curiosity smells play a great role in when you're working pressured animals, whether it be deer or predators. That plays a big role there. And lastly is gland. I'm a big proponent of gland lures. You can get on the YouTube channel and you can see us making various mock scrapes and me making various gland set posts. It's on our YouTube channel, and I encourage you to go look at it, because there you'll learn the how-tos of much of these things. But glandular smells are the secretions of those animals you're intending to go after. So glandular smell for a predator, it's hard to beat, because all predators are very territorial. Actually, all animals are territorial, especially a big white-tailed buck. He'll take survival over reproduction any day of the week. So if you're using a gland smell on him, it's a right choice to do it. But if you're putting a bait in the hole, if you're trapping coyote, and you, instead of using a shot of urine, which you can use, and certainly that tells a story, but maybe you want to intrigue him a little bit more and put a gland lure and truly challenge his territorial. So if you have another coyote, or maybe a fox or a bobcat, that buried some bait there, and the coyote, being an opportunist, goes in there and tries to take that bait, and hopefully you catch him. Gland lures play a big role in everything, so pay attention to gland lures. And lures in general, if you're buying a product, it should state right on there, whether it's a gland lure, a food lure, or a curiosity. That's the building block for you to tell that story out there. So take that home with you and think about it. But glands play a big role, and you want to make sure you have a few of those in your arsenal. The second thing about lures in general is viscosity. I get this a lot, an awful lot. And, which is better, thin lures or thick lures? Neither. It's up to the lure maker that makes that lure, that understands those ingredients that he put in it to expel odors. A thin lure expels odors a lot faster and more uniformly than a thick lure. And thick lures play a role. I think it plays more of a role of an application than it does the significance of it, because you need oxygen and bacteria to create odor, and if oxygen can't get into the product, it can't create odor. So thick isn't necessarily always the best. The combination, the in-between a thick and a thin, is probably where you want to be. So don't judge a book by its cover. Well, it's thick, it must be a better lure. That's not the case at all. Thin can certainly play a huge role in communicating. So you got to rely on your lure maker. You got to get to know them people, and see what their accomplishments and what they do and their reputation behind that lure. But thin versus thick is not even a subject matter. It should be something in between. Think of this, if you would. We all have gone in the fridge and opened up a jar of jelly, and only to find out there's a bunch of bacteria at the top of that jelly, right on the rim, right on the top. And I ask you the question, why isn't that bacteria all the way through that jelly? And the reason is that odor's a two-way street. If oxygen can't go in, odor can't come out. It's as simple as that. So yeah, it's thick, and yeah, it looks like it's gonna last forever, but it's not communicating. So when you go look at that thick stuff, think about that analogy with jelly, and you'll have to go back and re-scrape that surface to get any kind of odor out of it. I'll throw the jelly out, but if it's a lure, you're gonna have to re-scrape it. And in my opinion, and I don't denounce anybody making a thick lure, I just don't see the role that it necessarily plays other than application. I do a lot of fisher trapping, a lot of people do, and use a lure of that kind of consistency because you can really paste it on the tree and have it stick there, So don't get caught up in judging that book by the cover, thin versus thin. It really doesn't have any balance at all. You want something in between. I'm going to send you home today with this analogy of a scent and a lure. And think about it as you're going to use these tools, because I think this sets home your choice and what you're really looking to do out in the field. If you and I sat down and have a steak dinner, and we have identical steaks, T-bones, we take your steak, we get the pan hot, we add a little oil, and we just throw your steak into that pan, and we start cooking it. And we cook it till it's pretty much done, medium, and we take it out of the pan and we just put it on a plate. In that same pan, we take my steak, we flop it in there, except now as it's sizzling, we add some butter to it, and we start to add some ingredients. We start to add some rosemary and thyme, maybe garlic, onion, salt, pepper, Worcestershire. We start adding these ingredients into that steak, and we start cooking it till it's ready, medium, and we put that on the plate. And if I was holding these two steaks, which is more attractive? The first steak with very little added to it, or the second steak with all the additives to it? And there lies the difference. Which is more attractive? The scent of that first steak that was just thrown in a pan with a little oil, or the lure of the second steak that had all the additionals added to it? I'm kind of hoping you say the lure, because that's the truth. Is, you might say, I don't really care for that rosemary that was in there, but you, just like animals, are willing to overlook that because you love that buttery smell, that garlicky smell, that Worcestershire smell, all that coming together, and you hopefully devour that steak as well. Not to say that you're not going to eat that first steak of that scent, okay? Not to say you're not going to, but if you had a choice, I'm pretty sure you'd go for the one that's full of all the ingredients. So there lies a very basic and brief touch on scents and lures. Maybe someday we'll do a more comprehensive video for you guys if we keep getting inundated with more and more questions about scents and lures. But I think this will start you off. And if you follow the simple rules of knowing the categories, knowing the difference between a scent and a lure, and present that in a way that tells a story to those animals, you're already so far ahead of the pack. It's not funny. So I hope you learned something, and I want to get back out in the field and do some more trapping and hunting.